me do this. So Rose is going to be talking to us today about bioactive enclosures. For the last less than a year, actually. So last fall, I got into isopods by accident. And then that sent me down this deep, deep rabbit hole with isopods and springtails. And then in that rabbit hole, discovered how good they are for bioactive enclosures. And now, just coincidentally, over the last couple years, bioactive enclosures has been like a super hot topic for a whole bunch of people. So there's a bunch of YouTube videos now and personalities talking about it, whatnot. So anyway, thought I'd pull Rose in. I've purchased isopods from her in the past, and she's very active on Facebook. She's a moderator and all that kind of fun stuff. So she's gonna kind of just give us a little bit of information, and then the discussion part will be pretty short, and then we'll do some Q&A, and then afterwards we'll do some announcements and whatnot because I want to cut her loose since she's on the East Coast. We'll talk about our upcoming show and other events that we got going on. So let me pull down this photo from the shared screen. I'm gonna jump straight into the first folder. Is that okay, Rose?
Yeah, no problem. If you want, you can just kind of, as far as like the species go,
Yeah.
you can just kind of let them play as a slideshow so people can look at them while I talk, because it's not like I have any diagrams this time to really go over. But I'll just go over what they are, pros, cons. We'll get into some aquatic species that are not going to be isopods. And then we're going to get into the isopods and springtails. And then I'll try to get through this. If you want to cut me off when we're about when we have about 5 minutes left or something, then that's when I can species.
Okay.
That way we're just doing a little going over that or whatever. But so we'll start off then. Basically, what is your bioactive enclosure? As the name kind of suggests, everything is run the same way that it is when you're outside, biology, life. It's activated by the life. So you need to have a couple of things in your bioactive enclosure for yourself to be successful. And you're going to need yourself, along with your cleanup crew, which is the isopods and springtails, you're going to need nutrient-rich substrate. It's very important. You're going to need the appropriate amount of hydration depending on what species you're keeping. And you're going to need to have, well, you should have live plants. For keeping isopods, just isopods colonies, you don't necessarily need live plants. But for a true bioactive enclosure, you do want to have live plants in there. The live plants are going to help with your nitrogen cycle. Bioactive enclosures are going to be, let me see if I can move my camera a little bit, or just take off the mount. This is a tank I have set up that's bioactive. I don't actually have anything in there besides a small amount of pruinosis, plants, and springtails. But this enclosure I use only, you can see how it's not so beautiful. I only use this to propagate plants, and it propagates plants very, very quickly just because I have it set up like a tropical environment in there. But that's bioactive. There's the isopods in there and the springtails in there that help with eating the dead plant material and keeping then, with their waste, keeping the plants nutrient rich and everything. So like I said, you don't necessarily have to have a vertebrate in there to have it be bioactive. I actually also started kind of accidentally getting into isopods because I wanted to have tanks like this where they're just vivariums. There's only plant life in there. I did that because I have, like I had mentioned before, cats that don't know how to behave themselves, and I wanted to have a lot of plants in my house. So I started making small terrariums with moss and things that would always end up dying. And I didn't know that, well, I needed springtails at least to help keep that cycle going, eating the dead material that dead material fueling the new life forms of material, the actual creatures in there living off of that and propagating. But when you add those things to your enclosures, you have basically a small biosphere doing everything that happens in nature. So when you bring this into your turtles and tortoises, you can take away part of their diet, because depending on which species you choose and what your enclosure exactly looks like, your reptile may be able to eat isopods as part of their diet. And you get rid of a lot of the maintenance that comes to it. Isopods will eat away at the reptile feces, so it takes away a little bit of that maintenance. You still have to do your regular maintenance. If you have your terrarium fully planted, and I know a lot of you guys too you have larger animals that are living outside, especially with your your weather and everything. So you kind of already have a little bit of that going on if you do house your reptiles outside. There's some of that stuff happening naturally. When we do go over the species of isopods that we're going to go over, those are all going to be ones that should be naturally occurring in your area. So that means if you really wanted to get your hands dirty, you should be able to turn over a couple of rocks, find some, rotting wood, lift them over and find some of these species. Like I said, some of the pros are going to be, less maintenance on there, more of a natural and enriching environment. It's going to be more cost effective on you because you're not going to be spending so much money on bedding constantly. It's more aesthetically pleasing for you to have live setups, rather than having some animals, though, like my leopard gecko friend here, for instance, they don't do well or as well in smaller planted enclosures because they're known to dig up stuff. And I know some tortoises are going to be, turtles too, are going to be doing that. They're going to be digging up everything that you tried. So that's kind of a con, is depending on what species you're looking at. Maybe you can't do bioactive. Maybe I'll go over some of the, I'll just name them off real quick. These are some species that will work in a aquatic bioactive. I have autosynclus algae eater right now upstairs in one of my aquatic enclosures, and I also have ghost shrimp. Both of those are very small and can become prey to your turtles, but they're also, generally speaking, pretty common enough that especially the ghost shrimp, it might be something you're already offering for food. The Cory catfish are another one that are pretty good to go with, especially if you can get the larger size one. They have harder bodies and they're very quick, but they'll also help with eating any of the extra waste. There's another arthropod that's similar to isopods that's called triops. I don't know what their scientific name is, but they're basically like very, very small horseshoe crabs that eat. They won't eat as much of the waste as much as they'll eat waste from plant matter. That's kind of the niche that they fill. And then you can go with dwarf species of Plecostomus or plecos, and they'll do a really good job at keeping your aquatic setups clean. When we go back to the cons, like I said, some people, it's not ideal for them. Other cons could be the species that you're looking for may have restrictions, or they just may not be available to you. I know in Florida, the very basic powder blue, powder orange, those are called pruinosis. They're actually illegal to own there, just because if they get out, it's a big problem. Another con, where are you going to get some of these species? Some of them might not be extremely common in pet stores like Ghost Shrimp, for instance. Where I live, there's only one pet store that carries them. So that can be a con for you. That's kind of what I written down to try to keep it condensed. Where are we looking at on time, John?
Oh, you're fine. You got plenty.
Okay, I mean, I can get into the various little species I have there and talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Oh, well, go ahead and play the video about the springtails, and I'll get into the springtails a little bit and tell people how they can go about getting their own, because it's not very difficult. Any of these, it's not very difficult, but we can play the springtail video.
Yeah, let me get that up onto the shared screen.
Yeah, springtails are kind of going to be your base starter. Like I said, even if you're not doing large vertebrates in your terrariums, like I keep very small, like little glass jar enclosures, and those are the ones where I definitely want to have springtails in.
But we seldom see them. This pin will give you an idea of why. They're tiny. This minute little creature is a springtail. It's less than 0.5 millimeter long, the size of a full stop. In 1 square meter of soil, there may be over 10,000 of them. Drying out is a very real danger for them, and some waterproof themselves regularly with a droplet of special grooming fluid. You might even say that they have turned bathing into an art form. They even have 2 inflatable tubes that enable them to get to those hard-to-reach places. To help them get around through the leaf litter, these springtails, as their name suggests, have a rather novel way of jumping. They have a tiny 2-pronged lever beneath their abdomen. One small flick from it can catapult them 6 inches, some 15 centimeters, into the air. It's the equivalent of a human being jumping over the Eiffel Tower. And if they happen to land upside down, well, they have a special way of righting themselves. They use their grooming fluid dispenser to stick onto the ground so that they can pull themselves back onto their feet.
Meticulous is an incredibly intelligent, highly powerful computer built into an espresso machine. This is the
All right, hopefully that transmitted okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Interesting.
Yeah, so that's David Attenborough's explanation of what springtails are. And like I said, these guys are really like your bare basics for a bioactive enclosure. And these literally are, like he said, you pick up a little scoop of soil, you'll find them. You will find them. You just have to have good eye to look for them. The first cultures of springtails, the first cultures of springtails I've ever cultured were ones that I had a plant I brought in for the winter, and there were 2 different species of springtails just that started occupying that soil. And I'm sure they probably would have done something similar even if the plant had never been outside. I'm sure they would have gotten within the house sometime, some other way, just as any other microorganism ends up getting into your house. Excuse me, but springtails, again, you can definitely find them. You can buy them. These white springtails are kind of like the most common. I have several cultures of those going. I also have some cultures of silver ones. I'm not super into springtails, so I don't know a whole lot of their names scientifically or enough about them to give you much species detail, but they come in a huge array of sizes and colors. There's some that in the whatever hobby pet trade, they call them Cheetos, and I have no idea what their scientific name is, but they're bright orange and they have pink ones. Like I said, I have ones that are silver and iridescent when you shine them, and I have these white ones that are very similar to, you know, the one, yeah, these are actually, that was my culture from last time. But they're very small little guys. They do a lot of work. These guys, even when you have isopod enclosures, just tubs with isopods in it, you want to make sure you have some of these guys in there because they eat mold. For us, that's one of the primary benefits is not only are they eating dead plant matter, but they're also eating that mold. They eat fungus, but also isopods will also eat fungus. So they don't necessarily need to be there to control fungus, but the mold is a big thing because the isopods won't touch that. Isopods will use mold, however, though, to keep themselves alive in like extreme dire situations. I found this out, unfortunately, firsthand, that they will congregate around because mold needs also moisture, and it doesn't seem to affect the isopods that they are living, you know, right up with that stuff. But if we go through the slides of the isopods, I could start showing the ones that should be available not only to purchase, but also just to find. And this is Armadillidium nisatum. They get their name because they have a protrusion on the front of their carapace that it looks like a nose almost. So you can see two color variations. There's a normal one, and then the other one would probably be considered either an orange or orange vigor. But it's some type of a amelanistic genetic mutation of the nisatum. Nisatum and vulgare are two of the ones that we end up calling roly-polies as kids. They roll up into the complete ball. The main difference that you can tell along with that protrusion is you could see that these guys have somewhat of a skirt at the end, and when they turn into a ball, their ball is almost like a nautilus where there's just a little bit of a lip versus vulgare, which makes almost a complete circle. This is just another picture of nisatum in the wild color. All the isopods we're going to talk about right now are ones that you should be able to find locally. So if you don't have the money to go and spend, to get any of these, the ones there on the right are called peach. They can go for they're pretty priced. They can get to be a little bit more pricier than like the regular color ones, because that's not a color that is easy to proof when you breed them. And when I mean that all of your individuals come out with that, and like you could see there's one that's a little bit more gray, but you're not going to be getting that kind of a look when you have a good proofed culture. And then here's some more with just the natural coloration. You can see these guys are all kind of balling up on some type of a mass of something that they're trying to eat. That's just a really good close-up of them, so you could see their different features. You could see how they have in the back end that kind of skirt versus vulgare, which doesn't have that at all. It's much more of a, you hear the term pill bug. Sometimes it has more of that pill look to them. This is that's T. Rathke on this one. I guess I must not have labeled it correctly. Yeah, these are all T. Rathke. You should be able to find those ones as well. They naturally come with that orange calico type of look, but they also come with that brown look. When I'm out looking for isopods, I find these very, very frequently. in both colorations. That's not uncommon at all, but some dealers will have you thinking that it is an uncommon coloration. And it's also a coloration that's not going to be proofed. This guy looks like, that looks like a Lavis. Did I have that one labeled?
It's in the folder with the Nasatums, but yeah, that looks either that or it's a dwarf
I think
white.
that's, I don't think that's a dwarf white. I think that's a Lavis, because if you look at the background, that's pretty large.
Yeah, it's a
for a
little bigger.
But I think I must have saved that one because it was a really strange coloration. I hadn't seen it before. But yeah, we can skip over that one. Yeah, that's T. Rathke again. Just as another, that's in another light. So you can kind of see that they have that iridescent sheen to them, and that's also very common. Again, this is another T. Rathke. Yeah, that's T. Rathke. It's just a different coloration, and that's not so typical of the wild ones, for it to be that orange and not to have so much of that black model to it.
All right, so that's all that's
All
in
of,
the Nasatum folder.
yeah.
Let's
So
see.
all of these ones, like I said, that we're going through, you're going to be able to find them in the wild. This is Armadillidium vulgare. They're a really common one. That's what, when we're children, we find them under the rocks, we call them roly-polies. Sometimes they're Nasatum, but when we're kids, we don't know the differences. But they come in a huge variety of color. That one looks like a red vigor. The first one we had was just their normal coloration. Depending on where you are, they may have different colorations to them. Is that a St. Luca, does it say? The first one?
It's not labeled.
Not labeled.
The file names aren't changed, yeah.
Yeah. Those ones look like they're either a mix or the Punta Cana ones on that picture, but some of them are naturally, depending on what location they're derived from, they'll have these different colorations, like as you can see in this one. And that's not from breeding. That's from just, it happens. It happens so that they can blend in. Now this is a bred version, and these ones look like they're Japanese magic potion, just because they have such vague black spotting. But that's just that's more of a man-made morph on them. They're a little bit smaller than the regular ones are. This is a wild species, something that we're probably all familiar with, and just a really good close-up so you can see. And you can see how it's lacking the skirt in the back, and there's no protrusion on the front. That one has more of a uniform look to its carapace, to the armor plating on it. And both of those two we just talked about, Vulgare and Nasatum, are extremely hardy species. They can tolerate a good bit of drought. They're really, really easy to come across. They're both very prolific. They're not, especially for your larger turtles and tortoises, they're not going to be a good source of food because they don't get very large and they tend to hide. But they're still a really, really cool isopod. Definitely a great beginner because they're extremely common. Turn over any rock in your backyard, you'll find, a couple dozen of these guys.
All right, so that's all of those. Next folder is the Lavis. Whoops.
Okay, Porciello lavis is also really popularized in their pied version, which is dairy cow. That's an orange one. I think I made sure I pulled out an orange one because they usually only get the dairy cow coloration. A lot of reputation for that. Lavis are bigger on protein. This is a really cool one because it just shows so many of the different ones. And I think that one I had first, I think it was a Lavis, because you see how we have these like ghosty looking ones. I'm not even sure what that morph is called, but it was the first time I had seen it in lavis. But it's really cool. They're a little bit more on the larger side, maybe a little bit smaller than a nickel, between like a nickel and a penny or so. But they're big on protein. So if you have a reptile that has hardy skin, they're not good for like my gecko friends. But if you have stuff that has hardy skin, they're and an insectivore or a carnivore, they're really good for cleaning up after them because they want that excess protein. They're not good, like I said, for soft-bodied animals because especially when our reptiles are shedding, that's when they're more vulnerable. And if they, they can start to do a little, I don't want to say that they're going to like hospitalize your reptile, but they're going to make your reptile uncomfortable. And if you can avoid that, just why not? But here's another little mix of them in the orange color. And the one in the back there, that blackish one, is their natural coloration. And then the pied, the dairy cows. The dairy cows are going to be one of your most common ones. These are milkbacks. I think that's what those ones are called.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the dairy cows are one of, like, besides the pruinosis, the powdered blue or powdered orange, I think dairy cows are going to be right up there on the pet trade. Right up there with like the top isopods you're going to find.
All right.
And John, you said in your experience with selling, do you take dairy cows with you?
I do, and I normally bring some back home.
Oh, interesting.
Well, so here's when I sell my isopods, all my middle of the road stuff, I price market value. And then everything that's cheap or really expensive, I price low. I don't know why I do that, but
Hey,
probably why, because like all my Panda Kings and stuff disappear right away. And then all my cheap, cheap stuff goes away real fast. But yeah, most of the stuff that I sell for like $1 or $2 a piece, they kind of tend to linger.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think dairy cows are probably one of my favorites just because they are bigger. They're not as fast moving, but they are voracious eaters and they're not as shy. So they're out and about all the time.
Do you have Dilatatus or giant canyons?
I do, but I don't have enough to sell those yet. So
Yeah, they're really cool.
Colony.
Yeah, they're huge. They're really cool. I have some of them in my bioactive scorpion enclosure, which if anyone out there is thinking bioactive for a burrowing arthropod, it's a terrible idea because you'll never see your arthropod again. Well, you'll see them, but like very, very seldom. As soon as I put my scorpion in his enclosure, I've seen him like 6 times, and he's been in there for probably like 4 or 5 months. But yeah, he's living off of isopods and crickets here and there. So we're looking at still.
These are the scaber.
I was gonna say, we're not looking at lavis still.
No.
Yeah.
Lavis is done. We're on to scaber now.
Yeah, so scabers, I don't have these in my area. We have them in my state, just I haven't seen any in my area. But they're also a really popular one in the hobby. They come in a tremendous amount of colors. You can get them in these like orange kind of colors. You can get them in bright orange. You can get them in there's like a peach color here. I mean, like, it's just so many. You get them in pied. You get them in their own natural color. These are the pieds here. You can get them in their natural color, which is kind of like a mottled black. You can get them in straight black. Here's a mix of them, but they're really cool. And I wish that we could catch them, but these are another ones that are really good for cleaning up after larger reptiles. And one of my suggestions was for people who do keep outdoor reptiles is to kind of colonize your isopods by collecting wild ones, so you're not changing the environment around you. Colonize your wild ones that you can catch in your yard, and when you do find areas where your animals like defecated, pour your isopods, a good little handful of them, in that area and cover it up with either a you know, like a convex rock or even like a terracotta pot, something that'll keep the isopods in that area and wanting to, you know, eat up any of the waste. That's what I would suggest to doing, you know, when you have that type of scenario. But this is just some more of a mixture of them. Looks like it's mostly the natural coloration on them. And these are some more more, I guess, like you would say designer calico ones. Very common, lots and lots more colors than what I'm showing you here.
Cool. That's
It's-
the last of that folder.
That should be what I have had. I don't think I sent you any of the Ocellus. Ocellus was probably about the only other one, and they look very similar to the scabbard.
I have some from the last folder you sent me.
Okay, these ones would have been from,
Yeah.
this was a colony I had unfortunately lost, but fortunately they were all wild stock. So I can, once it's a little bit nicer out, go ahead and catch some more of them. But they're really cool. They have this really nice flat look to them. Some of them will have like iridescent sparkling to them and they get called Mardi Gras, but that's like actually a naturally occurring coloration to them. My macro lens got some really good pictures of them.
Cool. And I'll just throw in some fun facts. Isopods are actually a crustacean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're actually closely related to shrimp and crabs. So they do require, most of them, fairly humid environment. And then one of the new vocabulary words that I enjoy saying is conglobate. So when isopods roll up, like a roly-poly rolls up into a ball, the verb to describe that behavior is conglobate. That's fun to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll pull up a couple of the enclosure pictures you sent in the past, so people know what
I was talking about when I say fully.
keeping isopods as pets, not just as part of an enclosure, which is what I do.
That was full of moss at one point. That had moss everywhere, and they just ate it all. It was so pretty.
Yeah,
But you know,
yeah.
oh, I did. I would have sent you, I think, at some point, or maybe I had just only taken the pictures for it. But I had made up photos of a kind of like step by step how you would want your bin set up. Yeah, like something like that.
Yeah.
And that just shows you how I have all my bins have some place for them to hide, some type of calcium source. And these are all just vivariums that I had made up that I had never intended to put any vertebrates in, only some isopods, only some springtails, and then a bunch of plants. And none of these ones that we're going over here still, none of them have any more than just some springtails and maybe some isopods in. My leopard geckos, though, even though I have them as a breeding project, they are in bioactive setups. I put them in with some nutritious dirt. They're living Nasodum, because Nasodum can take that dryness, and my geckos have a little moist retreat that the Nasodum can also retreat to.
So is that like a 12 by 12 by 16?
No, what size is this vivarium?
Yeah, it was a 12 by 12 by 16, yeah.
And you
Which
just
is like I
just put them in there and keep them as pets, and they.
now for like that 12 by 12 by 16, I wouldn't keep isopods in. The smallest I'd keep isopods in would be the one that we said had a lot of moss. I think you had a couple pictures of it with some moss in it. That's
It's like a 10-gallon, right?
that's like a 2.5 gallon.
2.5
And that would be all I would recommend going with, but a 10-gallon would be nice for a display. But you definitely don't want to go with anything too small with them. Like these those jar kind of ones. I don't have isopods in those ones. I only have springtails in those ones. You can do dwarf whites, but I've never done that, one because I never wanted to have escapees, and two because I never wanted to have it be overpopulated. That's what happens in these types of enclosures, like the one that's up right now. They end up becoming overpopulated, and what you'll have is a wave of adult die-offs, and the young ones will survive. So you'll lose a huge population, and then new ones will come out. And that just happens because you don't, like, for this one, I needed to have more, you need to have all of those levels of bioactivity, because I didn't have anything coming in there bringing in new, like the poop. I didn't have any animals coming in there bringing in new nutrients, but I would have needed to keep it going indefinitely would have been something like millipedes and earthworms, adding more to the decomposition process that would also then put more nutrients into the soil. This enclosure I still have, it still has Punta Cana, A. vulgare in it, but now it's not pretty, but it's what the species needs to survive. And again, this is just for this. It was supposed to be a nice display, but they ate all of them. It's in their nature. They ate all of the moss. They left it stripped like that. And I ended up having to here and there just throw in new pieces of rotting, decaying log to keep the colony going. So it's not, here, I have it right here. But it's not pretty though. It's not lit up or anything, but it's just, it's nothing to look at, but there are isopods in there, you know? So I can sit here by the TV and here and there, a couple of them come out, get to watch them, see their cool stripes and things. But it's unfortunately, it is what it is on as far as what they're going to be eating goes.
Cool stuff. Anybody have any other questions, comments for Rose?
So what do they eat if you just have like isopods in it?
They
Um,
eat
yeah.
your detrivore. So with all of your soil, you want your soil to be really nutritious. Like I was saying with mine, how it was lacking earthworms. Worm castings are extremely nutritious. They're very, like they're one of those things that just gives the earth all of that fertility, and it just like, it's just so much better for them. Everyone's just like any other recipe or ingredient list, everyone's going to have like their own unique specific, this is what I use with these specific ratios, but pretty much every substrate mix for isopods you see is going to have worm castings in it. They're detrivores, so they eat dead and decaying vegetable matter. I actually, since it's now springtime, I went and picked a bunch of little small like buttercup flowers and threw them in with my isopods. They ate them up so quick. I was kind of surprised they ate them and they're still somewhat, pretty much living, but they left all the green stems. And one thing that about isopods when you're getting into them and learning about their diet is they actually don't like chlorophyll. So they ate the yellow of the plant, but not the green of the plant. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought by the way, they were kind of swarming around the flowers. I thought they were going to leave nothing at all, but they left all greens.
That's so weird. That's very interesting.
But they ate all the moss.
Oh, how weird.
I don't know if that's a difference because I know moss it's not the same as a regular plant. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it has anything to do with just that makeup of it, but
Yeah, it's not chlorophyll. My biology is rusty. It's not, they're not the same. They're
Yeah, they don't have the same structure.
yeah, they're different, a whole different moss, and they're a different kind of a plant. They're not even in plantae.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that they weren't really comparable, and they're not like
Yeah.
I knew they weren't like lichen, but I wasn't. For botany,
Yeah, yeah. But there's mosses, gosh, the hornworts and all those, they're in a whole other category. Liverworts and hornworts or something. Yeah,
Oh, wow. I don't know that either.
yeah, they're in a whole other category that's not plants.
Hmm.
They're much more ancient.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew that part about them. And maybe
Yeah.
that has to do with why they
Yeah.
consume part of them. It's because it's the lack of chlorophyll. I know that when you're like me, I don't know exactly what you guys' climate is, but we have a lot of deciduous forests. And in my area specifically, I don't actually have any conifers. So it's really easy for me to pick up leaf matter to feed to isopods and to add into my substrate mixture. And that's actually also something that I end up selling to places like I sell a lot to people in like Arizona because they don't have deciduous at all out there. So that's like kind of like one of the little niches I am able to fill is getting in deciduous products, bark. Like as you can see in this one, I have several. All that stuff is things that I go out on properties where I have permission to harvest and bring back, you know, this or that, whatever I find, moss, rotting wood, you know, whatever it happens to be, isopods.
I also feed fish food,
Oh,
old expired fish food goes to my pods.
Everything
Yeah.
gets used.
Yes,
Isopods, you could really use them too, like in if you have outdoors like something like a compost heap. I don't know if they'll get in a bin. I wouldn't see why they wouldn't get in a bin. But they'll be in compost. They will be eating things like tubers. You know, those don't have chlorophyll in them. But yeah, they're great cleanup crew for. I mean, that's their niche in nature is to just go through any dead vegetable matter and deteriorate it, get it down more. That's why I had mentioned those triops earlier. Depending on what type of and size of your aquatic reptile, they may become very, very quick food. But if you don't have something that's really into like some individuals just they prefer pellets over live food. So if you have something like that at home, you know, those would be a really great addition to your cleanup crew, not necessarily for cleaning up after your animal, but cleaning up your animal's environment.
cool. Any other questions for Rose? Oh, here, let me, can't see you, Joyce. Let me, turn off the spotlight. There we go. Oh, you got your camera off. Ah, tricky, tricky. Okay. All right. Anybody here? Anybody, anything for Rose? No? You good, Eric? Okay. Well, Rose, thanks again for doing this for me. I will reach out to you sometime this weekend and work out some other stuff. But I'll cut
Sounds
you
good.
loose since you're on the East Coast and it's getting late.
Yeah, if I have any questions, just write them down and I'll try to get with you and answer anything.
Cool. All right. Sounds
Alright,
good.
rest of
Super
your night.
appreciate it. All right. Thank you. Have a happy Easter too if you're doing anything fun.
Yep, you guys too. See you
All right.
later.
See ya.
Thank you.